What we're gonna make is ropa vieja, okay? Ropa vieja is a Cuban tradition. We use garlic.
Roberto Meireles shares the flavor of his homeland with America's heartland. And the Cuban exile also serves up an intriguing tale about fleeing the island long before being drawn to the state of Nebraska.
I was 14 years old and I left in 1966. The whole plane was full of kids, basically the same age. Because between 15 and 28, you were supposed to be in the military. So you became like a Castro's kid at that time.
Not long after the Cuban Revolution swept Fidel Castro into power, the U.S. government, private donors, and the Catholic Church liberated more than 14,000 unaccompanied youths by plane across the Straits of Florida. The flights, known as Operation Pedro Pan, operated under the umbrella of the Cuban Children's Program and became one of the Western Hemisphere's largest ever child refugee migrations. Miami was a primary destination, but when the Cuban Missile Crisis unfolded, air travel between both countries came to a grinding halt. Aspects of the program continued, though, by taking the scenic route. So Meireles and others flew to Spain, frightened, without their parents.
It was like a nightmare because you cannot see them when you needed to see them.
Meireles says church officials helped the displaced children cope. And after a few months, he was delivered to his uncle in Miami, where he eventually worked in the restaurant business while studying civil engineering. After building marinas and seawalls for over 25 years, he met a Midwestern couple on a sea cruise, and they became good friends.
They were always saying, you know, why don't you come to Omaha? Why don't you come to Omaha? One day we came and I fell in love with this place here because I like the people. A little tax, but a good life. Extra tax.
With a stockpile of family recipes, Meireles cracked Omaha's vibrant restaurant scene by opening Gusto Cuban Cafe in the city's Ralston suburb 10 years ago. He met his wife Ana there, who moved into business alongside her husband. And while foods associated with her Mexican heritage are well known to American palates, the couple feels there is room for education about the variety Cuban dishes have to provide.
Like, for example, the Mexican food with the enchiladas and stuff, it's the spices that the Cuban food is cooked in. It's a lot of different spices, but nothing is spicy hot.
Cuban is more like a Spanish food from Spain. And it's like flavor. It's not about being hot or not too hot.
The restaurateurs admit there are challenges to replicating authentic Cuban cuisine in Middle America, saying many suppliers calling on Gusto Cuban Cafe simply do not have access to the products they require. And sometimes shipments that do come through the area may fail to meet their expectations. Farm advocates claim an easing of economic restrictions under the Cuban embargo, first imposed by the Eisenhower administration, would allow imports of high-quality organic produce from the communist country. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Cuba's main benefactor, financial isolation and a lack of inputs like fertilizer forced pioneering chemical-free efforts that made Cuba an organic farming model for the rest of the world. And after President Obama's rapprochement with the former Cold War adversary, his USDA chief, Tom Vilsack, pointed out that comparative advantage when he escorted a Cuban agricultural delegation through neighboring Iowa last year.
We have a tremendous opportunity in Cuba to expand exports of soybeans and rice and poultry at some point. They in turn have a tremendous opportunity to import into the U.S. organic production. Trade must be a two-way street.
While congressional efforts have paved the way for limited agricultural exports to Cuba since the late 1990s, denial of credit under the embargo and requirements for upfront payments in euros eventually forced a modest surge to stall. But American farm groups and legislators continue to push for entry into a market of 11 million mouths just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And progress on that front has been made. The New York-based U.S.-Cuba Trade and Economic Council recently tallied over 170 tons of American rice cargo sent to Cuba at the end of 2016, the first shipment since 2008. And earlier this year, the Pearl of the Antilles shipped its first legal export to the U.S. in over 50 years, clean-burning artisanal charcoal made from the invasive marabou plant.
If you believe in free trade, and in fact, if you believe in economic progress, this is exactly what we should be doing.
President Trump has promised a break from Obama's Cuba policy, while current USDA Chief Sonny Perdue is championing foreign trade amidst distressed farm income forecasts.
What you do worldwide.
And importing U.S. commodities also could help buoy Cuba's nascent entrepreneurialism. 7 years ago, the government loosened business restrictions, and among other opportunities, private restaurants emerged, called paladares. Most are family-owned and operated out of converted homes to serve growing legions of tourists and wealthier Cubans.
Every living soul in Cuba, they all cook, and that's what I try to do here, to bring back the old Cuba.
Roberto hopes to make a return trip to Cuba someday to give his wife a taste of the island's unique zest.
Ah, there it is.
And they will continue to share their love of cooking and hospitality with their Midwest community.
This is very important in Cuban food.
For Market to Market, I'm Josh Bittner.